Right, cool, we ready? Yeah, nice one. Hello everybody, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Chris Spalton, that's my face. I'm a product designer in the Foundry. I'm also a sketchnoter, so I've been doodling today, and I do that semi-professional doodling stuff for a bit. I'm very proud to say I'm now officially a comic book author, which I'll go into in a bit, and I'm also a giant hypocrite, right? So it's like, this isn't a talk where I'm telling you I'm right and this is the thing. It's as much of a journey and a reminder for me as it is for you. There's stuff in here that if you know me, I'll be telling you to do stuff I don't do, and I'll be telling you not to do stuff I do. But it's, you know, it's all a process that we're on together, right? Obviously, it's the last talk of the day, so I might just dry up and turn into a biscuit and crumble on the ground. That's how I feel. But we'll see how it goes. And obviously today we've been learning about three, you know, super important tracks at Redgate, whether that's the culture and the customers and the build. I'm kind of simultaneously not going to talk to you about any of those things, but also all of them at points. But the main message of this is that you're going to die and no one's going to give a shit. It's likely to be one of these two people. I find it really hard to keep up with this slide because things change. Theresa May's been on there, Kim Jong's been on there, everybody's been on there at some points, but these are the two I'm settling at the minute. And whilst that sounds a bit harsh, I guess, A, it's true, and B, there's a positive message for all this. So this talk is based on, not based on, but a lot of the lessons I've taken from this book here by Austin Kleon called Show Your Work. This was been a really important book to me. I read this book about 4 or 5 years ago, and it changed my life, man. So this talk is basically about the lessons that I've taken from that book, how I've applied them, and the outcomes that they've had, essentially. What I would be interested in is can I have a show of hands for someone who didn't submit a talk for Level Up this year? Okay, so a few. Can I ask you why you didn't, then?
Didn't have anything to talk about, didn't know if I was able to, and I'm not really product.
Okay, cool. So there's different rules. Okay, well that's a big shame, right? Because I firmly believe that the world is a better and more interesting place with your ideas in it, your ideas in it. Anybody put their hands up, the world is a better place with your ideas out in it, unless you work for an arms manufacturer or whatever, in which case you should probably keep your ideas to yourself, or if you're a Nazi, or if you're a racist, or if you're a dickhead or a homophobe, keep your ideas to yourself. But generally, enlighten people. The world is a better and more interesting place with your ideas out in it, right? But there's several reasons why people don't feel that they could put their ideas out there. And these seem to be, from talking to friends and colleagues and stuff like that, these seem to be like the top 5 things I hear. So it's like, I'm not good enough to do it. There's an element of, with social media and stuff, there's an element of being able to see amazing work and be inspired by that, but also think that you're never going to be as good as that. So why should you bother creating anything in the first place? One is that you're not allowed. You might be working under an NDA, or maybe, oh, this is sensitive information, so we can't share that kind of stuff. One is that you don't have the time. One is that you don't feel you're a creative person, so kind of what do your ideas offer to the world, whether you think you might have a boring job, not that any of us would, but people in the world do. So, I've got a boring job and no one's interested in what I've got to say, because I just go to work and do my thing every day. And the other one is really just not knowing how to start, right? That's a big blocker, like how do I even start doing that sort of stuff? So I'm going to go through these and the kind of lessons I've learned in turn, right? So the first one is I'm not good enough. Being good isn't actually enough anyway. Like in this day and age, you have to be findable. If your work isn't online, it doesn't exist. It's all very well being a tortured artist in your attic, creating stuff. I've got a friend, James Dow, who's an incredible artist. He's been out of work for ages. And because he doesn't do social media, no one knows he's an amazing artist. So his housemates do, but they're only going to buy so many prints off him because they can just walk into his bedroom and see them whenever they want. But no one else knows, right? So they don't know, and he could have an entire career there, but because he doesn't do social media, it's just limited to them. And no doubt it gives him a sense of well-being and sorts his mental health out when he's out of work and stuff like that. That's cool. But there's also there's an opportunity there that he's not taking for it to go a step further. You also don't need to be a genius, right? Which is good, because you're not one. Redgate is actually the first place I've worked where there might be one or two. That might just be me not understanding what half of you were gibbering on about anyway. But it's fine, right? It's like people like Leonardo da Vinci and Mozart come around once every 200 years, right? So you don't need to be the best person ever to contribute to a discussion, right? Instead of being a genius, you just need to find your scene, Eos. yeah, to hang out in, right? I don't know if you know these guys. These guys are bronies, so they dress up as like My Little Ponies and have a wicked time hanging around and stuff. But at some point, there was a guy who wanted to dress like a My Little Pony, and he was like, I don't know if I can say this to anybody, but he took the plunge and said to his mate, I like dressing up like a fantasy unicorn. And his mate was like, yeah, me too, man. Let's hang out, right? Let's hang out and have a great time about it. And if these guys who are like, oh, dressing up like this can find a group, if you're into Kubernetes or whatever it is that you're into, you can find a community to join in and contribute to, right? Creativity is always a collaboration anyway, so no one's got any truly original ideas anymore. So if you sit at home and you're waiting for this spark of inspiration, that simply isn't going to happen. All creative processes, and the same at work, right? The team is a stronger thing, design is a team sport, all that kind of stuff. It's a collaboration, so it's taking ideas from one place, combining them with ideas from another place, and that's how you create something new. You're not just going to get a spark of lightning. So there's no need to put pressure on yourself to try and do that, if you see what I mean. You don't need to be the smartest, you don't need to be the most talented, thank God, else I wouldn't be stood up here. You just need to be able to contribute to a conversation, and that's how to start the ball rolling, right? It's like there's little pockets of communities out there on Twitter or wherever else that you can contribute to discussions, and that's how the ball starts rolling and you progress from there. The most important thing is to embrace being an amateur. Amateur, I don't know if you know this, linguists among you, amateur comes from the French word amateur, right? Which means lover of, right? So if you love something, amateur gets a bad name, right? Because it's like, oh, that's amateurish, or there's an amateur footballer who just punts it out the ground and like, nice one, mate, whatever. And everybody thinks it's a bad thing, but actually because it just means lover of, who can ever say that it's a bad thing to love something and have a go at it, right? And that's a great starting point. I like this quote from this some Zen master, Sunru Suzuki. This is what I mean about drying up. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, and in the expert mind, there's few, and that's because the more you know, the narrower your scope is, because you instantly jump to the right answer. Whereas as an amateur and someone who's allowed to experiment, because you've got that mindset, you can try all different sorts of things, and it doesn't really matter if it fails because it's part of the learning process. And being crap to being good is just a series of small steps anyway, right? You have to be crap before you can be good. So you have to love what you're doing in order to make that progress, but it's just this series of small steps. Yeah, where's that? There's that whole arrow on that last page is actually just this tiny little bit here. The main part of the entire journey is from doing nothing to doing something. So I have actually got another really relevant quote from another famous philosopher, which is, if you're doing something, you're already fucking miles ahead of someone who's not, so start doing something, and that's from me. A good example of this, I'm really into my bands, as people know, right? I like my music, so a really great example of this is like the kind of early punk rock scene in America, the alternative scene in America, right? Like these guys, some of these bands, like you've got Nirvana on there, you've got Soundgarden, all that. They went on to sell millions of records, but at this time, they weren't selling any records, but they needed people to come to their show so they could contribute in their way to the world by putting their ideas out there, right? But they didn't worry that they weren't professional graphic designers. They just slapped some stuff down. It was like, come to our shows and see us play, and there's our message. And even Kiss were one of the biggest bands of the 70s. That's their very first ever poster. And they were like, we need a logo for people to come here. So Ace Frehley, the guitarist, he drew that logo in Sharpie. And it was like, cool, we now have a logo, right? He didn't wait, we need to go and get a designer to do this, and we need to pay thousands of pounds to do it. He just drew it in a Sharpie, and now that logo's on lunch boxes, it's on hot rod cars, people have been buried with it on their coffins and stuff, and it all came from, I just need to draw something and get it out there so people can identify it and come and see us. And another good example of this is, you'll remember this hope poster when the world still had some hope in it a while ago. Shepard Fairey, the guy who designed that, didn't just email President Obama and be like, dude, can I do your poster, right? It took a process of being crap at design, so to speak, and getting good at it. So he started off with these Andre the Giant Has a Posse stickers, and he slapped all them around San Francisco, where he lived, and Providence. And then that went viral in the days before the internet, and then he turned that, because of the interest in that, he managed to progress that to the Obey Giant clothing brand, which you might have seen t-shirts of and prints and posters and stuff. And from there, he got hit up to do the president. But it was that journey of being an amateur and loving what he was doing and developing his ideas from there. Another iconic figure that might provide hope to the world is this guy. This is my dad. He's the last remaining eel catcher in the fens of England, right? And he's the fens, the fens. He's a weird dude. He catches eels. He's had a strange life. And I've been telling funny stories about him down the pub for years to all my mates, right? And it got to a point I was confident enough with my sketchnoting that I was like, okay, maybe I'll try and document that in some way. I've never written a comic book, or I've never done anything, I've never written a story or anything like that, but I'll try and document it in some way, because I got good laughs off my mates when I was telling them about all the weird stuff Dad gets up to. So I started drawing a comic book, and I'd never done one before, like I said. So that was when he met Tony Martin. He was involved in the Tony Martin burglar shooting. This is when he met Prince Philip down a ditch and gave him some crayfish and told him to take them home for his tea. And this has progressed and rolled on from here. So now I've got my own clothing brand. So the Eelman Army, there's hipsters from Seattle to Shoreditch to Singapore walking around in T-shirts based on my old man. I've got stickers, I've got prints, I've got badges, I've got all sorts of stuff. So I've set up my own mini brand, set up around Dad, basically, much to his bemusement and confusion. And because I started doing this and the ball started rolling, I've had great opportunities off it. So this was when I spoke at Reasons 2 in Brighton. That was the biggest screen I've ever stood in front of 400 people chatting about my old man. I managed to self-publish it, so I set up a publishing company because that just seemed like the logical progression of stuff. And then made an actual book. I've sold a load of books. It's in sales in London. It's on sale in many shops in London. It's in the best bookshop I've ever been in Brooklyn. It was the best-selling comic book in Norwich for 6 weeks running, proving that it's not Batman or Spider-Man, but it's the Eelman, the hero the fine city needs, right? And I put it out there, and I sent it to people. These people here, I sent it to them, and I just sent them rough photocopied pages and scanned-in pages of it, and I got all this amazing feedback from it. And that really gave me the encouragement. You don't know if something that you're doing is shit until you put it in front of somebody, and then that can validate it or not. And especially the guy in the top left corner, he wrote the very first review of it, and now I'm good mates with him now because that kind of really gave me the spark. He said that reading my comic book had made him want to made him ring his dad, who he hadn't spoken to in 4 years, and he's that's the most powerful feedback ever, right? But you have to also be realistic about this sort of stuff. It's not the best comic book in the world, right? It's not The Dark Knight, and it's not The Watchmen, but that's still cool because 90% of everything is shit anyway, right? If this inane, soulless, generic, bland dickhead can make a living off music, right, I can make a living off a comic book of some description, right? And what I mean by 90% is shit anyway, 90% of everything is shit anyway, is, yes, it is, that's fine, whether it's Celebrity Love Island, all that crap, whatever. But actually, you don't need to worry about any of that. You don't need to worry about appealing to everybody, because you're never going to. What you need to do is find your 10% of people that think what you do isn't shit, and then connect with them and build a community with them. Ignore the rest of people. Someone who likes, well, I don't even know what they're called. I don't watch them, but whatever, celebrity gangbang. Someone who watches that isn't going to necessarily like my comic book, right? That's fine. That's cool. So you should try new things. Likewise, I dabble in making music and things like that. And because I've got this amateur mindset, I love making music. I'm terrible at it, right? But no one expects it to be in the right key, or no one expects it to actually make sense or be a tune of any description. There's no pressure there because I can experiment. I just put cows mooing into it and chickens crowing, and then I've got some form of hillbilly punk rock song, right? But you could try everything. Comic books might not be your thing, but maybe writing blogs is, or maybe doing a YouTube thing is, or maybe a podcast. I know some of us do the DB Ale podcast thing, all that sort of stuff. So it's trying all this. If something interests you, have a go at it and see if you can progress it. It might be that you have a go at it and then never do it again, but that's fine. And it's you just need to make that start to get the ball rolling on it, basically. Another good way I've found of kind of making sure I do stuff is by saying I'm a thing and then doing the things that thing does. And it turns out that you become that thing. I did it with sketchnotes when I first joined Twitter. I was like, I'm going to share my first sketchnote, and I was worried about it. And I was like, well, if I put that I'm a sketchnoter and do the things a sketchnoter does, which is make sketchnotes, then lo and behold, I'll come one. And I haven't always been a UXer. I've always done kind of this sort of stuff, but it wasn't that. And I had to do like a kind of formal career change a few years back, six or 7 years back. But I was like, right, well, I'll put on Twitter that I do UX, and then if I do the things a UXer does, which is UX, lo and behold, I'll be a UXer, and then here I am as a product designer, right? So that kind of thing. It's almost like making a promise to the universe that you'll follow through on. Okay, some of the stuff is I'm not allowed. Like we're good at Redgate in terms of this sort of stuff, and there's a lot of freedom to share stuff. But I've worked in places where there's been NDAs, for example, and you can't share commercial work. The sensibility, all competitors might see it. Or I worked in the insurance industry for ages, and they were really secretive about that sort of stuff. But there's a way around that as well, and that's by sharing your process, not the product. Like the business that you work for might own the thing that you make, right? But they don't own the process, your process, which is how you solve problems in a way that you care about and you're passionate about, and that's yours, right? It doesn't matter. The end result might be theirs, and they're paying you to make the end result, but the way you get there is yours, and you can always find opportunities to share stuff with that. So a good example of this really is the Mona Lisa, right? You can he worked pretty hard on the Mona Lisa, I've heard, right? But he releases it, and it's meant to be a masterpiece. It leaves me kind of cold, right? It's just a nice picture, fine, right? I'm not that bothered about the end result. So there's also that kind of aspect to it. You might just release a polished thing, and someone goes, oh, yeah, that's fine, and moves on to the next thing. But if you share the process of it, he had to think of the location he was setting it in. He had to think of the canvas it was on, the paint he was using, the color scheme he used, like the lighting, the tools, the model, and the frame. That's all where he's solved a problem. He's had to fix something there, and that's all things you can talk about, and that's actually what you're more passionate about maybe than the end result, right? It's like, and other people will be, because they're dealing with similar problems to you that they also need to solve. This really came to light when I was at my last place, and we redesigned the Simply Health website for them and all their kind of experience and their different touch points and things like that. And the guy I was working with, the designer I was working with at the time, Luke, he was like, we got to the end of this 3-month project, and he was like, oh, we should have shared some stuff. I could have shared some stuff, but I wasn't allowed because we're on an NDA. But we had a massive row about this tiny little icon up there, just a little login icon, right? And we couldn't show the whole thing because they were going to launch it as a big rebrand and all that sort of stuff, so it was very secretive. But we spoke about, does that icon represent what it should do? Should it have a tag? Is it in the right place? Is it the right color? All those kind of things. And there's a whole industry of icon designers out there, right? And we could have contributed to their discussions and asked them what they thought about it and got their feedback. So whilst we couldn't show any of that, we could have had a lot of discussions just on that tiny little piece. And it would have been worthwhile to do, right? Hiding things doesn't help anyone, I don't think. Obviously, there are commercial sensibilities that you need to do, but where you can, you should look for opportunities to help each other and share information. I put this ostrich with its head in the sand because I was doing a project for 2 giant banks, and it was when open banking was coming out. And I would go into one meeting room with Bank A, and they'd be like, right, there's these 2 problems that we've got to solve. We've nailed. This was open banking was a problem that the entire banking industry was trying to fix. So Bank A, well, HSBC, right? HSBC, I would go into the meeting with HSBC, and then they would be like, right, we've got problem A nailed, but we're really struggling with problem B. And then an hour later, I'd go into the meeting room with Santander, and it'd be like, well, we've got problem, but don't tell anybody that we haven't done that. And then Santander would be like, well, we've got problem B nailed, but we can't solve problem A, right? And it's like both problems, A and B, are a problem for you both to solve that doesn't have any commercial impact because that's what the whole banking industry is doing. But because you're being so secretive, you're both going to balls it up in different ways. And then, lo and behold, the next thing you see when open banking is released, and then the BBC was covered in what the hell is open banking because no one's told the public what it is and no one trusts it, right? And it was just by sticking their head in the sand and pretending it was secretive when it wasn't, they just messed up everything for everybody, basically. Coming back to that thing of the lack of context, if your work happens to be an orange circle, which you're very proud of, and you just release that orange circle without any storyline to it, that could be a sun, a moon, an orange, a football, or a pizza, right? Because lacks total context. So what you need to do is, it's the hard work in the middle that is the interesting stuff and that will help other people solve their problems. Because it's all very well having ideas, but I don't really want a gravestone with Spalton thought of some stuff once on it. And it's all very well having the final product, but it's the bit in the middle where you can make real connections with people by sharing this process. So you might not like this picture, but I do. It's show what you're working on right now, right? No one wants to see what the sausage is made, how the sausage is made if it involves lips, eyelids, and assholes. But we don't work in the meat industry, we work in the digital industry, so we can show people how the sausage is made, and other people are trying to make sausages, so why don't we all just make lovely butcher's sausages together, right? Never let perfect stop progress, basically. You could show something at any stage, at any time, and it will help someone out. The way I learned this was by tweeting these couple of things out. So these were both under really big NDAs. One was for a final debrief of like this whole strategy piece. And this one here was, we did like like stop motion sketch note animation of this business's vision. And both of those were under hardcore NDAs. There's no way we could show them. But I could share that out. And that one on your left, that's nothing but some black boxes on a piece of A3 paper, right? But it didn't go viral, but it got 18 retweets and 51 likes just for some boxes on a page, because it showed my process in trying to deliver a presentation, right? And the final presentation was all super slick, but there's no way I could share that. But that gave other people ideas and generated a lot of conversations about how they planned it out, and again, it contributed to that community. And this one here, that's just me posing with a blank bit of paper, basically. But when I tweeted that out, it generated loads of conversations about, oh, what tripods are you using and what lights are you using? I hadn't even considered that would be a thing, but because it was there and I was sharing progress halfway through, it started to generate questions and stuff like that and conversations. So I always think the process is the reward in itself, really, in a way. The Eelman book is like, I'm not going to run away to an island because I've sold a couple of hundred copies of a comic book about my dad, but I learned a lot in that process of how to construct a comic, how to construct a book, how to set up a publishing company, all of those things. So the process itself is a reward, and that's what you have to embrace, rather than aiming for, I'm going to change the world or make £1 million and then get disappointed at it. It's like kind of almost like expect nothing and appreciate everything that you get, because that's the reward in itself. So you should take more photos, basically, document all the stuff you do, because it's useful for you to go back to and reflect on anyway. And usually I'd give a little challenge here. So tomorrow it would be cool at work if everybody took a photo of what they were up to at lunchtime and then shared that, whether it's just on the Slack channel or whatever. It's like just start taking more photos and documenting what you do. Like you can, even if you can't share the final product, you can share your scraps, your ideas, your kind of notes about stuff, all that sort of stuff, because it's your process and it might help somebody else out, basically. I just don't have the time. We've all got busy lives. I've got a big ass commute. Some of you have got children, things like that. We've got family lives. We work hard anyway. Our days are full, etc., etc. So I hear this a lot. I just don't have the time to share, right? Can anybody tell me what this is, by any chance? Anybody who I haven't already told or seen it? Treasure map? That's a pretty good one, but it's not. No. Okay, this is a visual diary from the Battle of the Somme in World War I, right? Let me give you some facts about the Battle of the Somme. On the first day, there was 58,000 casualties, 20,000 fatalities, right? They had 1.7 million shells dropped on them in 7 days. They got trench foot, they got gassed, they got shell shock, they just got absolutely brutalized, right? By the end of it, 1.3 million people had died. That sounds pretty busy, and they still shared stuff. And you work for a software company in Cambridge, so just saying, right? So it's about your priorities, yeah? The same people that tell me they're too busy to share any of their work won't hesitate to share their face, which is great. I know what you look like, but you take 1 million selfies. I don't need to see your face every time you look on the internet. There was the one lady who got attacked by a chimp who was on Oprah Winfrey, and she's got a story to tell, so she's cool. But everybody else, I know what you look like. I don't need to see your face every day. Well, unless it's in person. You eat food, awesome. So does every other living creature on Earth. If you've cooked it and there's a process there, there's something there that you could teach somebody, but otherwise just taking a picture of a pizza that you've got bought in a restaurant, that's fine. One of my favorites is this beer on a beer garden table, which shows me you're able to queue for a really short period of time before performing a really basic transaction. So go lads, that's awesome. And another one is, this is always a bit controversial, but your kids, right? Your kids are dumbass. I've been able to count to 10 for years. And also, 10 years ago, if I emailed you and said, Ali, sorry, I haven't seen enough pictures of your young lad on Facebook recently, you'd be like, you weirdo, get a restraining order, right? And rightfully so, yeah? But now it's like people get offended. It's like, I don't care what your kid's doing. Like, until it's working, no, I'm not bothered. I'm interested in what do you do, right? And how can we all help each other solve problems? And all you have to do is get into the habit of capturing one thing a day. So if you capture one thing a day, in a month you'll have 30 things, and in 365 days you'll have 365 things to share, right? And the way that Austin Kleon, who wrote the book, describes it is this is kind of like, he calls it your flow. So I use my Twitter as like a little scrapbook of collecting ideas and sharing what I'm working on at any given time. So that might be, let's say, UX, could be comic books, it could be sketch notes, it could be whatever. But after a while, you build up this kind of library, and it's all like, oh, okay, I was thinking about that, and it helped, like I said, same as taking photos, it helps you go back and reflect on what you were working on. And then when you got enough of that, you can kind of reflect on what you've been doing, you can collect and organize them, and that helps you generate like longer term content, and maybe that helps you inform a blog post or a YouTube video or whatever else. It's by having that track record, I can scroll through my Twitter and see what's going on and generate something else out the back of it. So a good example of this, this is where I learned this lesson kind of thing, was just once on a lunch break, I just sketched, I sketch, I do UX, I use sketching for UX. So I just literally spent 10 minutes drawing some quick doodles on Post-it notes. And I just threw them out there. Here's the 7 reasons why I use sketching in UX. And that went down pretty well. That generated some conversation. So then I thought, actually, maybe there's something here. So I went back over it and did like a Twitter thread. And like, here's step 1. This is what I use it for. Just a brief description, a couple of lines description. And it kept moving on from there. And then from there, that also went down well. So I was like, well, maybe there's a blog in this. So I wrote a blog on it, Pens Process Product Sketching for UX. That started then to get shared around. It got picked up by a Medium publication. More people tweeted it from there, and eventually it got picked up by InVision and Marvel, and they published it on their blogs. And now like 80, 90,000 people have read that blog. And that's not massive numbers, but it's like, that's given me a sense of kind of legitimacy, let's say, and kind of some form of authority that I know what I'm talking about, because a company like InVision picked it up and the audience they've got, and that literally just started off from a 10-minute couple of doodles on a thing, but because I could reflect on it and I didn't just bin them off, I could develop it further. No one's a creative. I'm not a creative. No one cares what I do. I hear this all the time, and I think it's a big shame because everybody is actually a creative person. We all have ideas. The only difference between creative, hairy-fairy person and someone who isn't is just the creative person writes it down, right? That's basically the only gist. Everybody's got ideas about all aspects of their life, work, love, whatever, all the time. But then they'll still say they're not creative. Everybody's always looking for improvements to how they can improve stuff. And that's an idea that you can contribute to the world and help someone out, sorry. And we all solve problems every single day, even if you don't consider yourself a creative person, which I think the majority of us are, because I would consider code to be, you're making something, right? I consider that creative. But I worked in a call center for years, right? And that's a traditional kind of just mindless job. You're just picking up the phone and dealing with it. But you're still solving problems every single day for other human beings, right? So there's something valuable in there. And again, I guess it comes to the fact of, maybe I'm not ready to do so, or something like that. But common sense isn't so common anyway. It's like, on the second day of your career, you know something that you could tell someone on their first day of their career, right? So it's like, it doesn't have to be this mind-blowing thing. We all got skills that we could really use to help someone out who's in a pickle and sort them out. And again, Redgate's really good for this. It's like, we're known, as a really, really great software development company, but we could also, there's loads of stuff we work on, right? And we are good at it, but there's leadership, strategy, even all this stuff, but even stuff like front of house, right? A receptionist is a bad word to use, but it's kind of, again, it's the same as an amateur thing. It's got a negative connotation, but receptionists have skills that I don't have, and you don't have, right? I wouldn't put you in front of people, greeting people, right? Right, and there's a ton more, that's a skill, the way they greet people, where they sort them out, get the right coffee, put them in the right places, be really pleasant stuff. That's all stuff that could help somebody out. And there's a load more receptionists in this world than there is tech leads, right, or UXers, right? And so why instead of being the best software development company, why don't we just promote the fact we're the best company? That kind of thing, all aspects of it, like a holistic view of it, and we can share all that stuff. But as a counterpoint to that, because I'm nothing if not a contradiction or a hypocrite, like I put on the thing, there's also this fact that you only, I firmly believe that we only actually have one job in life, and that's working for ourselves the whole time. So while you're working as a team with whoever that team is, whether it's at Redgate or previous place or your next place or your last place or wherever, or the place that you started with, like it's find a way to contribute to the greater team vision, but also don't forget that you've got this little red stream your own, and it's always important to keep your mind on that, because I've been in a situation, I've been made redundant at the drop of a hat and all those kind of things, and it's important that everything you do is supporting both aspects of that the whole way, because you don't want to dedicate your whole life to yourself and not help your team out, because that will get you in trouble there. You don't want to dedicate your whole life to your team, because you might end up taking paths that aren't true to you, basically. It's really important to keep that. A while ago, I kind of changed my mindset from I'm not working for you, I'm working with you for as long as it works for both parties, if you see what I mean. And that's really helped me over the last few years. And coming back to yourself, it's like you like cool stuff, whatever you're into, unless it's 90% shit, you like cool stuff and it all influences your approach and your outlook to life. And that's an important thing in order to make connections with people. So I like comics, I like weird bands, I like Jack the Ripper, for example. I like walking around Norfolk. But all those things actually make me who I am, and that's the authentic voice to it. So you should never dilute that, because that actually has an impact on how you approach your work today. Everything does, So if you want to contribute to conversations, I think sharing other people's stuff is a great way to do it, because that's how you get the ball rolling and make allies early on. I always think 30% of your stuff should be your work, and then you should never lose. Don't be afraid to. Some people are like, oh, I've got a personal Twitter and I've got a professional Twitter and all that kind of stuff. I don't worry about that, because it's all me. So it's like, take it as you want kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? It's either you like me and the stuff I do, or you don't, and I'm cool with either of those. So just do that. I think it's important to show authenticity and vulnerability. And all this stuff creates a library of you, right? You're only as good as your record collection. DJs don't make their own music. They take, again, coming back to the idea of collaboration, everything a DJ does is a collaboration between all their different influences, and something new comes out of it. You also have to be patient. It's like people, who was it? What was his name? Pete. Pete, where I used to work, I was like, you need to get on Twitter, dude. He's an amazing visual designer, awesome visual designer. I was like, you need to get on Twitter because people should see this sort of stuff. So he posted a thing out in the morning, and then by lunchtime, he was going to kick off because like only 2 people who liked it. Bear in mind, he only had 1 follower. Like, it's just like, dude, no one's, like, they're not just going to be like, hey, there's a new hot shot in town instantly, right? You have to be patient, and you have to build up these connections, and you have to support other people. Don't ever expect anything for nothing. That's how it works. It's a deal, and that's where you can find the good pockets of social media. So I mentioned this earlier, expect nothing and appreciate everything. The day I went like a little country mouse and took the Eelman to London. I had like 30 books in my backpack, and I literally went and knocked on doors and gave them out. And one of my friends was like, I would never dare do that because you're going to get rejected. And I was like, of course I'm going to get rejected, because they're in the middle of their day, and then all of a sudden some weird fen boy just bowls in, I got a book about eels. And they're like, what are you on about? Of course you're going to get rejected, right? But I didn't. I got rid of them all. I got rid of them all apart from one, and I managed to flog that to a guy on the train on the way home. So it just goes to show you can do that. The most important skill in the world, it's not how well you can code in Rust or whatever you guys code in. It's not how well I can design things. Your mum and dad gave you the most important skills on day one, which was always say please and thank you. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Just be polite about it. People generally want to help you. And just ask nicely and say thank you when they do. That's still the most important thing I've ever learned. I've got further with that than I ever have with my limited skill set of drawing like a child, right, and chatting nonsense. Onat spoke about this earlier on. Learning and teaching. Teaching is the best way to learn, and learning is the best way to teach. So it's a continual cycle. When I wrote that blog on sketching, I became a better sketcher as a result of having to formulate my thoughts than had I just carried on sketching, because it was a different way to approach stuff. It made me organise my process, and it was a better result as it should have been. Doesn't have to be public speaking. Public speaking is a bit nerve-wracking, but it is great because it helps you formulate it and helps you tell the story. But like again, it's whatever helps, whatever is the best format for you. So try different stuff until you find the one that you land on. I'm also a big fan of, many people say, just say no to stuff. I don't know how many of you will remember Zammo. He just said no to heroin, which is good. But if someone invites you on a podcast, even if you're a bit nervous about it, say yes, right? You should say yes more to things if they interest you, because that's how you start. The more you do the stuff you like, the better you'll get at the stuff you like, and the more people ask you to do more of the stuff you like doing, right? And it's continuous. So just say yes. You are going to die anyway, so what does it matter, right? It's like, when I'm laying on my deathbed, I don't imagine I'll be there going, that random guy on Twitter laughed at my stick man, right? I'll have bigger shit to worry about, like the devil and all that kind of stuff. So some idiot on Twitter isn't going to bother me too much. But just the flip side of just saying yes to stuff is watch out for stress, right? Don't put any pressure on yourself. The way I approach these things, if I'm feeling lazy, which is a lot, and I just want to play on my PlayStation, that's what I want to do. But if the motivation strikes me that I should be doing something else, then I'll act on it. And that's kind of another promise I made to myself, act when the motivation is there. The first rule to any of this is to have fun. There's no point in burning yourself out or being one of those dickheads on LinkedIn that's like, I got up at 3 a.m. and crushed 20 sales deals and ran 100 miles and all that sort of stuff, right? They're going to burn out and die sooner than possibly me. Unlikely. But the first rule of everything is to have fun doing it, else what's the point in being here, right? Why are we all here to not enjoy what we're doing? Also be careful about becoming human spam. Just a quick note on that. Don't just bombard stuff out. I've got a mate, Speeves, who's a marketer, and all he does is retweet stuff like the 7 best tips for SEO. And he doesn't put any of himself in there, and he might as well be a bot. So lo and behold, he's a marketer without a market, which seems to be counterproductive if you're in that realm, right? So if you're going to share something, share it wisely and put your own spin on it, right? Whether it's good or bad, it might generate a conversation, you might learn something, you might teach something. Again, it comes back to that. Nearly there, sorry. Another one is, I don't know how to start. Just take a note from this guy. He doesn't give a crap. He's off. They're left them all standing. Just do it, right? It's the perfect thing for that. I'm not saying break any rules, but like just go for it. There's nothing holding you back, right? So yeah, just fucking do it, right? Momentum is your friend. It's that first thing, right? Until you get to be this businessman in a massive snowball falling down the hill of glory or whatever it is, you have to make that first step of pushing the first snowball off. So just do that, and then momentum is your friend, and keep doing stuff, and opportunities will come your way, and you can, like again, share knowledge and all that sort of stuff. Wait until you're ready. You're never going to actually be ready to do anything. I've done this talk a bunch of times. I wasn't ready to do it today. I was like, oh, can I run out and have a cigarette? Do you know what I mean? It's like waiting until you're actually 100% ready is just an easy way to quit while you're behind. Oh. Obituaries aren't about people dying, unless you're Mo Lester. They're about all the cool stuff they did when they were alive. I'm not even into wrestling, but I know Shane McMahon threw himself off a 60-high-foot cage and elbow dropped somebody through a table or whatever he did, and that's amazing. So that is what your obituary should be about, the cool shit you did when alive. And there's nothing holding you back on it except your big fat butt, right? That's the only thing that's holding you back. If you keep saying to yourself, but I need to wait, but I need to wait, but I need to wait, that's only you that's holding yourself back. Without wanting to be too much of a hippie about it, sharing is caring, and I honestly believe these, right? Like, whatever the meaning of life is, I don't know what it is, but it feels to me like the meaning of life should be, in the time that you're on this earth, try and help the people that you can, right? That seems like a reasonable approach. I'm not going to solve climate change, right? That's way too big. But if I can maybe get my girlfriend to chuck an extra yogurt pot in the recycling, it's like, I don't know. But I think we need to help the people that we can while we're here. We might all end up dead in a nuclear apocalypse. We might all boil to death in an ocean that's on fire, right? All these sort of things. So let's just help each other while we can and connect with like-minded people. I think that's the way. And just, in a way, also like reclaim. Social media gets a bad rap because all the Nazis and racists and dictators and homophobes. Why should they have that? Why should they have that when there's loads of lovely people out there, right? It's like, try and find those people. I don't know. I'm not a guru. There's no mountains around here to sit on top, so who knows? So just to recap, if you think you're not good enough, learn out loud until you are good enough. If you think you're not allowed, the opportunities are there to share stuff and connect with people. You just have to find them. If you feel that you don't have the time, just start documenting and sharing one thing a day and turn that into a habit. If you're not a creative, if you think you're not a creative, you are, but you really know something that can help other people out. And if you don't know how to start, just fucking do it. You're going to die, I'm going to die, we're all going to die. Let's all try and make someone give a shit before we do. Just to recap on that book, that's Show Your Work Whilst in Cleon. I'm happy to bring it in. You can read it in about a train journey, basically. And there's a couple of others that I can recommend for you. And yeah, thank you. That's it.